teachers, the teachers, the teachers, the teachers.
My brothers and sisters of color, we gotta do better. No survival in this era if we turning on each other. Like a family reunited, they hate it when we together. Now let's talk about it. Listen to the teachers, let them tell you. You want facts behind your questions, Dr. Rick, give them that. Followed by wise words, introducing Dr. Michael Blanchard. Many guests and activists every week leading by example. When there's problems, there's solutions. Together we are the answer.
The teachers.
Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Rick, and I'm along with my colleague, friend, confidant. We are connected in so many ways that our lives parallel far too much. But Dr. Michael K. Blanchard is here. I'm excited. Doc's excited. And you'll know why when I tell you who our guest is today. It's Marshata Caradine. Originates from East St. Louis. And if you don't understand anything about St. Louis, you can't appreciate that, but you will before the day is over with. And the reason I'm excited is that Marshata is an advocate. She's an educator. She spent a lot of time in the educational system in the classroom. She understands the challenges that our children face on a regular basis. She understands how, in many instances, our children are targeted. And when I asked her what part of this vast area of knowledge and experience does she want to focus on today, she said the school to prison pipeline. Anybody that has followed me on the Black Voice or the Teachers or anything else or read any of the 25 books, you know that that's going to be a point. I find a way to put that in almost everything that I talk about, because if we don't address the issues that are facing our young Black males, it doesn't matter how fluid our females become. We don't have male leadership, male protection, and in the masculine energy that comes, that's so necessary in the home, that's so absent in the home now, we're going to have problems in so many different ways. So I'm excited about this. I'm not going to prolong it. Doc, you know the routine. I get to start out. It's been a long time. I've been deferring for a while, and I'm pretty sure everybody appreciates you talk, Doc. I'm going to take the lead on this one. But Doc, first in with a question, jump right in. But what I want to do is I want to sort of open it up with an open-ended question that allows her to really truly introduce herself in a way that I can't. And then we'll get to more specific areas. But how did all this advocacy start? And, you know, what came first, the advocacy, then being an educator, or being an educator and becoming an advocate?
Advocate, becoming educator.
Okay.
Growing up, I'm from East St. Louis, Illinois, not Missouri.
Okay.
So you don't go through that educational institution and then become a parent and see the same issues. So I began to start questioning a lot of things, and once you go to college, you learn things differently. You see things differently. And then you come back to the hood, it's like, but not for you people. So once I became a parent, that's when the fight just started coming,
Right. And to add clarity to that, basically what she's saying is, everybody always talks about, when we talk about young Black males ending up in prison,
right,
they always talk about choices. And one of the things that I point out is, yeah, life is about choices, but in order to make a choice, you have to know that an option exists.
Exactly.
If you don't know the option exists, you can't choose the option.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go to college, there are a bunch of options that are introduced to you that aren't back in the hood, that right, you're going like, wow,
mm-hmm,
I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do that.
Right.
And so there's this thing. So When you go back, and it's like a high, then you come down. You're off, you're going like, wow, then you come back to the hood and go, whoa.
Yep.
And then I can't raise my kids in this environment and expect them to excel or have the best chance to excel. There's always some that are just going to come out of it no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
But the chances of them succeeding is dependent upon the environment you create for them.
Right.
So you have your children, and I want to early on in this frame this properly. So
Okay.
I should have said this earlier, but I'm going to say it now. This is the anniversary of Marshata losing her husband to COVID. So I'm pretty sure it's emotional for her. I'm pretty sure that it has a bunch of gravity attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to frame that properly, because life doesn't happen inside of a vacuum. You don't get to say, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm happening, and life stop happening around you to allow you to do it. You've got to do it in the midst of the throes of everything that's happening. And so I just wanted to kind of frame that. With all of that being said, tell me and the listeners, what got you to the point where you understood that was an issue? And it's becoming more prevalent with females too, but definitely with Black males as far as the school to prison pipeline.
Well, I was a single parent before my husband and I got married, and I was one of them violent, harsh Black mothers. And in reaching out to my resources and much more affluent women and men that I looked up to, I learned, like you said, about the choices I had. In taking parenting classes, I learned about options and everything, but they weren't readily available. So I had to redo a whole lot of thinking and approach to my Black son. And with him being in the school system, I knew we were working on healing us and bettering our relationship. So I refused to let them label him anything, because my son was very smart. Okay. It's just that rocky road we had. And until I got the help that I needed and support I needed, then my son changed. It was really a no-brainer. But yet and still, given the zip code, that says if you have the clinicians you need inside the schools to help you heal, or help you deal with these issues. And when I realized that this is all that's missing, I came hitting heavy-handed about our kids. It's like you intentionally preying on them and pushing them into this pipeline when you already know they need help. I mean, you legislate in our community to beat this, So I'm trying to process all this and be the parent and make sure our kids are covered inside the schools. So,
Yeah, you mentioned zip code,
uh-huh.
and basically what you're saying when you mention zip code, you're saying that systematically we are zoned out of access to the resources that we need in order to give our children the best chances.
The resources as well as the clinicians. It's like that's a privilege to have social workers, counselors, people who can actually help our kids through these hardships. So, yeah, zip codes matter.
Right. Doc, you got a question? Because I go on and on about this.
Well, I think what she's alluding to is that we don't have the appropriate wraparound services. And, that's my background.
Right.
Student persistence and growth can only happen when we have the proper wraparound services,
Right.
Whether that's mentoring, life skills, business creation, entrepreneurial programs to help our kids understand that there are avenues that they can go with that, mental health, and then also food assistance. There's food there. We have deserts in many of our neighborhoods. We have food scarcity. All of those things are help foster students becoming successful in life and through academics. And I know for me, um, you know, one of the things that happened to me growing up was my senior year in high school. I remember, and I told you the story before, Doc, and my mother and I went to my counselor. Well, I was in my junior year, and he was saying that I wasn't college material. And my mother said, well, you know what? Let me speak to the black counselor. And the black counselor basically led me into a program called Groups at Indiana University. And that was a program that allowed me to go to college. On paper, maybe I wasn't a college material because I had like a low 2.0. I was an athlete, so I just kept my grades up, enough to stay on the team, run track, play basketball, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if she had not had that fortitude to say no, I'm not listening to what you're going to say. He was basically saying that I should go to a trade school or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with trades, if that's the best that you can be, or if that's what your interest, that's where your interest lies. But for me, that was life changing, because if my mother doesn't push back and say, hey, I'm not listening to you, I'm going to, let me get someone that has my own best interest. And I think what we also have to allude to is that in our K through 12 educational systems, we're not educated in our best interests, whether we're being educated about politics, economics, criminal justice, religion, and spirituality. We're always seen as people that are viewing history and not making it. We're not part of the development of world history, and we're just spectators. And I think a lot of our students, become disinterested in school because they don't feel like their people have contributed anything.
Right.
We give us a Black History Month,
Right.
and we think that that's enough. That's enough curriculum for you, just a month worth of curriculum. So that's what I see from my vantage point. The curriculum does not educate African American students
At all.
in their best interests, because the best education I got was when I finished the institutional education. I began to go back and educate myself in my best interest, in my own best interest.
Right. And the connectivity that I get from what you added to what Marshata has been saying is this: my area of expertise, where I actually earn a living, is in human behavior. So everything from helping people heal from trauma to helping people perform better in their environment. So high performers and people struggling. I run the gamut. And here's the crazy thing: like, most of my clients are going to be affluent regardless of race. So they have access. But the one thing I learned is I've got several clients that are back in school on the collegiate level. A couple of them are international athletes, and they go back, and obviously if I'm working with them, there are some issues.
Right.
They've got on campus psychiatrists, therapists, all of these things that are not present in the hood. Now, they've had it all along because their parents can afford me. And what I've been crying out for so long to the people who are aware of what's going on, there are a bunch of kids whose parents can't afford me,
Right.
but still need the services, and probably need the services more, because again, we go back to the question that Kenya put up that I left up for a reason, because I'm going to turn that back over to Marshata. But a lot of these kids are being parented by harsh moms. Number one is because that's something that's passed down. That's the way we deal with things. See, way back over 150 years ago, when we didn't do what we were told, we were hit. Okay, so we learned how to be aggressive from people being aggressive. That's passed down. That's our relationship. That's how we groom our relationships, through control. And even with me, I was reared by my great grandparents. So I was reared in an environment where if you didn't do what you told, there was normally physical consequences for it. And it was met abruptly and harshly. I didn't have a voice. I didn't have the ability to say that I didn't like something. That wasn't allowed. And so you can see the difference in how I parent my older children who are in their 30s now versus the younger children who are coming into adulthood or young in their early 20s, completely different. Because as I got in and started to understand in my area of study, the impact that my harshness is having long term, and how it's also going to create a behavior in them that's going to cause them to be viewed differently when they're in society. They aren't being socialized properly because of that. So now that we talk about this, and Kenya's statement was excellent conversation. Harsh moms is an underdiagnosed issue in the Black community. And I don't want to put it all on the moms, but the reason that I think that that statement has so much power and that you started this off is that we're talking predominantly about single moms, because that's also an issue in the community that cannot be ignored, because it's a dynamic that influences the outcome of the child's life in so many different ways. But as you transitioned using the resources that you look like you literally purposely went out and found because they weren't readily available in the community, you went out and found them. And I think that we need to appreciate that, because the tendency, the human tendency, is to defend what you know.
Right.
And not be willing to say something's not right. And I love my child enough and I love myself enough to seek something that's uncomfortable, because I'm about to be told that I'm doing something wrong. Okay. So tell me about that experience.
Well, like I said, it was during parent education, and that's when I learned like parent education was in a whole lot of different fields, you know, from prison and, you know, and being basically denied access to go in and speak truth. I learned the hard way that you're really not supposed to speak truth. Go figure. And and I've been very transparent and open with my relationship starting out as a parent. And that's how I'm able to basically bond with the most hardest to get along with student, because I don't walk on eggshells. I hit them right where it hurt. And I talk about what mama said or mama did. And then I let them know why mama that way. And then I am not afraid to make them open their eyes. You know what I'm saying? Your mama love you. But ain't nothing like saying, if something happened to you, ain't nothing I can do. So I'm going to do it the best way I know how to save my child. And it's to be, I had issues with the harsh word, because they said that about Serena and Venus Williams' father. And if that man wasn't harsh, would they be who we're celebrating today? I mean, we got to prepare them for America that has not shifted with this, I ain't gonna say soft generation, but they're soft. They're soft, they're entitled, you know, because now we send them inside our schools. They don't have to learn, they have to show up, they don't have to do nothing. They running everything. They're running everybody.
Now, I 100% agree with you on that. And Doc knows my definition of education. I've written several books on education specifically, and my definition of education, so that we understand it, is simple. I say that education is not simply the acquisition or acquiring of academic skills. It is the preparing and empowerment of our youth to go out into a world that's inherently hostile towards them, and not only compete, but win. And again, I agree with you 100%. We have to find that balance between being loving and firm, which to me would be the distinction between harsh, is that I can be firm and loving, where you understand this is a threshold. You cross the threshold, me and you gonna deal with each other. And you understand there's a distinct and unwavering, non-negotiable way I'm going to deal with you if you cross that threshold. Now, how we deal with each other on this side of the threshold is different. But you got to understand that in order to stay on the side of this threshold, there are some things I'm going to demand of you. Right. You don't, and people got mad at Shaq when he said this. When he stood up, he told his sons, y'all not rich, I'm rich. And people, you know, no, yes. If you do everything that you're supposed to do, at a certain point in time, I have something to invest in you. That's called generational wealth. I'm supposed to pass that on to you.
Right.
But, just like they do with their kids, it's normally going to come through some form of a trust that has stipulations. And it's a reason why, because if I give a fool $1 million, it won't be his for long.
Right.
Okay, so I need to know that you're doing some things. But this entire idea that, we have an entire entitled generation. They think that everything is owed to them. They can't not face things that are going to happen.
Right.
It's just certain things that are going to happen because you look like you look, and you're not going to escape it because you don't feel like dealing with it. And so I think that we have to prepare them. And I think a part of the education is socialization by way of identity. The first part of socialization is making sure you understand, you know who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, you're about to go into a world that's going to tell you everything about you is secondary. Everything about you doesn't measure up. You're about to enter into a world where you're going to be confronted with the Eurocentric idea of what is, the Eurocentric idea of what's beautiful, the Eurocentric idea of what's professional. You're about to enter a place where we had to make laws just so you to wear your hair the way it grows out of your head. So you're going to have to be prepared to deal with that.
Right.
So now go ahead and again finish.
Well, I was going to say, so now you have educators such as myself up against the Euros inside the school system. And of course, our kids love the way they sound, but I got to look at their reality. It sounds beautiful coming from them, but reality says, I'm tired of burying you all younger and younger. You know what I'm saying? So we're coming off as harsh as Black teachers when all we're doing is equipping them, and even in love, you know what I'm saying? So we're up against the racism along with our students. And it's becoming too much because it's like we're outnumbered now.
And so help me understand again, because when we had our brief conversation before the episode, one of the things I said is my experience in education at that level is the research I've done, which is an outside study looking at an inside. You're on the front lines. I've had some experience. Because again, my son's mom is an educator. So I know what it's like in the classroom. I know what it's like in the classroom in affluent areas. I know what it's like in the classroom in impoverished areas. And that is a distinction between night and day. And so now when you talk about the fact that the predominant population of teachers are going to probably be middle-aged white women that have no cultural knowledge or awareness of the environment this kid is coming from to come to school and how that's going to impact their behavior. Something you said that just blew me away. And the average person, when they think about education and they think about health and things of that nature, the last thing on their mind is proximity. They don't understand proximity because they're not forced to think about it. You talked about when we started talking about COVID, and you said the 6 foot rule, distancing at 6 feet and all of that. And you talked about, okay, if a child is going home in an impoverished area, there is no west wing.
Right.
There is no other side of the house. Many of them are in 1 and 2 bedroom apartments.
Right.
Probably in the same room with someone that may be infected.
Right.
Okay, so that's just one component that proximity creates. It creates a bunch of other things that we don't take into consideration as educators, as observers, as legislators.
Right.
And the system itself, and I want you to speak on this, the system itself is never designed to actually help us empower ourselves. Because if the system was designed to help us empower ourselves, we wouldn't be zoned to an area where our access is determined about the amount of taxes we're able to pay.
Yeah.
Okay, because if if my kid is getting the education based on the amount of taxes I pay, and I pay taxes on the amount of money I earn, then my kid is not going to have the same access as a person who's earning 4 times more than me.
Right.
So that means that they're already starting at a disadvantage that I don't immediately have the ability to control. So that's a systemic issue. That is systematically saying you can, and then we have seen mothers jailed when they sit up and circumvent the system and get their kid into a school they're not zoned to.
Right.
I've seen at least 2 literally do jail time.
Yep.
For getting their kids, falsifying an address and getting their kids into a school where they can learn more.
Yep. You know, I spoke on that, and I think they call it education theft. And I said, that's education theft, but you coming into the hood, probably a recipient of the college scandal, hint, but I can't say education theft. Because clearly you come into the inner city and steal everything from our children. I mean, because they love Marva Collins' way, but they can't produce nothing Marva Collins did. Same hood, same poor, same everything. But they couldn't, because first of all, the love isn't there. And the belief in our kids isn't there. Because I'm a firm believer. Poverty says, my children cannot spend $2,000 this weekend just to go shopping. That's it. It has nothing to do with their intellect and their brilliance. They don't have any money, period. And Marva Collins' way is basically in just about every teacher's classroom, but they're not producing what she did. So, yeah.
Well, I mean,
I say, in the words of Malcolm X, only a fool would allow the enemy to educate their children. The enemy is within, because we're seeing our babies and we're losing them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've always felt that too. Who in their right mind would educate another racial or ethnic group to compete with their kids? Who's going to do that?
Right.
Right. And, you know, there's been this big conversation on race theory. And a lot of people think race theory is simply about history. Actually, race theory is about institutionalization of a racial caste system. And it started in legal academia, where they were asking the question, can we literally find laws and statutes that support a racial caste system? In other words, are there laws and policy out there that favor one race over another race? That was the initial discussion. So it's not simply about history. It's about historically, can we visit how they've held this caste system in place? Okay, so it's moved out of just being in legal academia. Now it's in education. Now it's in corporate America. We're studying how hiring practices are being done. We're talking about established policies and those unspoken policies. And so when we start to talk about that, now we start to see a situation where literally there is a system in place. Michelle Alexander did a great job of it in her book, The New Jim Crow. Okay, and so you have to understand that what we're talking about when we say critical race theory, we're talking about an examination of the policies in education, the policies in hiring, the legal statutes that, for instance, every Black person that grew up in the hood has seen, where if we study criminology or penology, and at the most ground rules level, it actually tells us that white males under the age of 28 are more likely to have illicit drugs on them than Black males. Black males are stopped at a rate 4 times more than white males. That's a policy that's in place that happens consistently. There has to be something. Anytime you see any statistical anomaly in life, it's called being statistically significant, and that statistical significance has to be explained. You can't just call it a coincidence. So when we make up Black men 6% of the population. And our race only makes up 13, close to 14% of the population.
Mhm.
Yet we make up the majority of the population in prison, right at 40%. We have more men in prison than they do. And
Right.
they have, I don't know how many more men out there than we do that are proven to be more likely involved in crime.
Right.
Now, all right, so then there has to be a system in play. It's not simply how many mistaken identities can you have when you've got a man, you've got a publicized situation where a black man is being released every month from prison after serving decades for something they didn't do. So, and it doesn't start there. We talked about this at the beginning before we got on about the disproportionality of special education referrals.
Yep.
Now, that is interesting, and I want you to elaborate on this. It's interesting because, number one, as early as 5 years old, we're sending our boys to a school where they're more than likely going to be met by a middle-aged white woman or a younger white woman, and in their best scenario, a black woman. Rarely a black man, because black men are just bailed from the classroom. So unlikely they're going to see anybody that they can relate to completely. But the black woman is their best hope because the black woman will almost authentically have a love for them. Okay, that's their best hope. But the chances are they're going to encounter at some point early in their academic career a white teacher that doesn't know anything about them and is afraid of them. Even at 5 years old, she's afraid of them, and she's already trying to figure out how to get them out of the room. And she's been prompted by administrators that if there are any problems, we can always refer them to special education. And there is a financial and economic benefit to doing so, because if you get referred to special education, that's at least double what you're going to get every year for that student. So now there's an economic incentive to refer. There's also a social incentive to do it. And then the child is probably going to come in with some type of behavioral issues because of the environment they're coming from. So now you have this situation. But now what are they going to diagnose them with easily to get them into that framework? ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, or some form of a learning disability. They love ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder. Why? Because now we get to bring in another element, big pharma. We're going to medicate them. We're going to give them psychotropic drugs like Ritalin, Vyvanse, Concerta, Norvasc, Adderall, and we're going to pump it into them, and we're going to make them docile. And they don't like the way that feels. But what are we doing? Those are Schedule II drugs, meaning they're highly addictive. You're addicting them to a drug, especially like Ritalin, Concerta, and Vyvanse. Those are like one molecule off from cocaine. They're stimulants. They actually give kids that are hyper stimulants because it tends to have the opposite effect. If you're already hyper, it tends to bring you down some. But we're talking a Schedule II drug. So they're getting addicted to the very drugs that their dads are going to prison for selling. So then what are you as an advocate in a world that I'm assuming is hostile for you because they don't want the truth to come out?
No.
So how do you move in that?
With my ink pen, picking these keys. You know, I do a lot of writing truth. You know, I'm not sugarcoating anything. And somebody got to speak up and out. Not only the heaviness of us African-American teachers, because before we're teachers, we're parents as well. We're citizens as well. So somebody got to advocate for our babies unapologetically. You know, so this is me. I'm writing.
Doc?
I think one of the things that has contributed to the low test scores, the low academic performance of our kids is the devaluing of teachers. I come from a family of educators. You know, some of them back in the 60s, they became teachers back in the 60s and 70s when a lot of African Americans went into that profession because I was one of the only ones that they could go into.
Mhm.
And back when we were in college in the 80s, 26% of all confirmed degrees were education. In 2022, that's only 6% of all confirmed degrees are education. Now anybody can teach. They're allowing people with military and their families to teach without training or education. They're bringing in foreign teachers who, like Dr. Wallace said, don't necessarily have the cultural understanding or background. And they continue to rotate the same superintendents throughout the country with the same mentality, And I also see a big more focus on security at schools than there are student outcomes.
Mhm.
And so we were talking about prison to pipeline. There is more money spent in security. Dr. Wallace and I wrote an article on that, where $3 billion annual cost to schools nationally for school security. And if we can't secure the neighborhoods where these kids come out of,
Okay.
what makes us think that any amount of money is going to secure the schools? That's how I am. And I just think that we could definitely affect the education by having more wraparound services and investing in that side, and investing in people in our own communities that have the programs that can get the type of results we need. But as you know, some of our people will never be allowed into the schools to get a contract with a school district, because the type of things that we're teaching, they don't want in the school. So that's the conundrum.
You messing up the game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is the thing that both of you are highlighting, is the hiding of truth. And the quote by Malcolm, man, I've said that so many times that, I can't even count, that only a fool would ask his enemy to educate his children.
Yep.
And yet we consistently do it. And we don't understand. And Doc, this is one of my theme statements. Black people consistently lose because we don't understand how things work. I consistently say that the way that we keep getting beat is we don't understand how things work. And we literally will deride the ones who try to teach us and tell us how things work. We get extremely frustrated with our reality, but we don't want to invest the time necessary to learn how we ended up there so we can do something about it. That tends to bore us. We want to hear gossip. We want to be entertained. We want to dance. And don't get me wrong, we're rhythmic people. We receive things by way of rhythm. That's why we learn better when we're moving. That I get it, but you need to change the stimuli. Listen to the music, but have something in the music that teaches. Hip hop used to be that teacher.
Yep.
And then it got hijacked, and now it's the enemy's tool. It's dumbing us down. It's focusing on it's focusing us towards drug use, misogyny, disrespect, all the things that are literally tearing the community apart. We can find it in our music now. I was watching an interview with Tank, R&B artist, and he mentioned some lyrics from Sam Smith, the English balladeer, and it was a song "Stay With Me," and he sung the song, "Stay with me, please stay with me," and he says, now that song went to #1 when Sam sung it. He said, let me sing it, stay with me, which means, hey, let's keep our family together. Let's keep our love together. Let me sing it, and it won't get anywhere close to the top 100. There's something about that thing where the black music, I can sing all day about sexing you down. I can sing all day about wetting you and popping a cap and blasting. I can sing all day about anything misogynistic. But if I start saying stay with me, it's rough right now, stay with me, please, baby, stay with me. Then all of a sudden, there's no place for that in the community, because the one thing we don't want you to do is remain a unit. And I've been talking about that for a lot of times. when J. Edgar Hoover was asked, what's the greatest threat to national security? He didn't say the Middle East.
Yep.
He didn't say the Middle East. He didn't say at the time the Soviet Union. He didn't say Cuba, who had missiles pointed at us. He said black unity.
Black unity.
And they have been spending so much energy and effort funneling our communities with things that cause us to dissipate and disconnect and become individualized. So the only thing we see is what we're going through, what we want. And then the ones that are actually capable of being the teachers and leaders, they give them crumbs from the table, pull them away from that role. We used to call them the talented 10th. The talented 10th had a role in the community. They were the leaders. They were the ones that went in and said, let me show you the way out. They were the Harriet Tubmans of the new age. But what happened is we're going to feed y'all. Y'all can sit over here with us, but you can't go over there and share it with them.
Right.
What we're going to do is we're going to give you a message to go give them because we need to keep them at bay. And that's what we're looking at, and it's happening consistently. And these are the things that we need to be aware of. I didn't mean to hijack you, but
you good. But when you said that, because I have it on a shirt, I say it to my 3 children all the time about Negro unity. But here recently, after the death of the Queen and how these African countries are rising up, I take that to a whole nother level now that I've never even understood. And it's like, oh, I hear these chains, buddy. I hear these chains because they rising up now. You know, so is this our moment or what?
It's funny that you ask, is this our moment? I think that, and you know Neota, and we are deeply connected with Neota and very protective of her. And, you know, whenever I think about Ferguson, I think of Darren and I think of Neota. And I think about what was taking place and how important it was for them to dissipate the unity that had built up. That was one of the first authentic movements in my lifetime I've seen. You got to go back to Watts to think about the Watts riots and go back to, you know, before that to see that we're not tearing up our stuff. We're here and we're raising hell, but we coming for you. And it was unified. It had grassroots leadership. And what did they do? They sent in people to infiltrate it and to disrupt it and to misguide and to mislead the masses into believing that they were for it, suck the support out of it, suck the funding out of it, and let it die. When I was watching what was happening in Ferguson real time, and I was going like, we're on to something.
This is it.
Ferguson is about to be the Mecca of Black change. And then they sent in, and it's so cunning. Again, it goes back to when you don't understand how things work. You get handled every time. So now what we're seeing right now with the Queen is we're starting to see people speak truth without fearing consequence. And then we're starting to understand something. And we have now something that we didn't have when Hoover said what he said. And that's an internet where I can create a presence. Even if you throw me off of social media, I can still create a presence on my own, get me a hosting company, put me a site up, and I can build a following where people who want to get fed can get fed. And you're going to have problems. And now you got people who are willing to speak power, truth to power, and you're starting to get things. But what you're now getting to see is, I predicted this about 20 or 30 years ago. The monarchy over there is on shaky ground already. It's on shaky ground. And what's going to happen is the people who really truly are deeply ingrained in the whole idea of a monarchy having a royal family, they're dying off. Okay, so now we're going to, why are we supporting this family again? You know, and what political benefit does it have? Because if you actually look at it, the royal family is the one connection you got to colonialism. and the damage that it did. And so, eventually France had to get rid of their emperor. At some point, it just doesn't play anymore. And it comes with people speaking out and telling the truth. Yeah. The problem is, in situations like this, the truth is never rewarded. Mm-hmm. The truth normally comes with harsh consequence. And so you have a bunch of people who know who won't speak it.
Right.
And so it takes somebody who has no fear. It takes somebody who sits up and says, I am trying to leave a legacy. And Doc knows that's a big thing with me, is leaving a legacy, because when you're gone, that's the only thing left to speak of you is your legacy. What would your legacy say? We can say a lot of things about Malcolm. The one thing we can't call him is a coward. Mm-hmm. He spoke truth. He stood on truth. He did not waver. He showed us how to love one another. And he even showed us toward the end of his life that every last one of them aren't the enemy. Mm-hmm. That some of our greatest enemies look just like us.
Yes, sir.
And then if we talk about Dr. King, I celebrate his legacy, not for all the stuff that most people know him for, not when he had a dream, not when he was marching and doing all that, but when he realized he had integrated his people into a burning building. Mm-hmm. How he knew. When you read his memoirs, mm-hmm. I get literally my hair standing up on my neck. Reading his memoirs, he talks about one night he's laying in the bed with Coretta and one of the kids, and the phone rings. It's midnight. He answers the phone, and and they tell him, hey, you cocky, what they called him, and say, yeah, we're coming from you. We're going to kill you. We're going to kill your family. We're going to burn your house down, blah, blah, and hung the phone up. He said he couldn't get back to sleep. He went in their kitchen, made him some coffee, and he sat down at the table. Well, back then, the table was in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Probably 2 steps from the stove. So he made it. He sit down, and I'm imagining this, and he's saying to himself, man, I don't want to die. Right. He's 38 years old at the time. He dies at 39. He's 38 years old. He said, I don't want to die, but I don't want to leave a legacy of a coward. And he sits up and shortly after that, he goes out. He says that a man that does not have something for which he is willing to die is not fit to live.
That's right.
And then he makes the decision to go out there and do what he did. He say, Washington, this time we coming back, but I ain't coming back to talk about no dream. I'm coming back to get my check.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then shortly after that, he's dead, and we find out in 1999 that the United States government was culpable in his death. That was proven in a court of law, mm-hmm. that they literally was behind this man's death, and the family was rewarded. I don't know how much, but they were rewarded because of that. But that kind of courage is lacking in today. And I tell people all the time, one of the biggest problems we have as Black men specifically in today is hero worship. Mm-hmm. We're so busy worshiping Malcolm, Martin, Marcus, that we haven't created what we were supposed to be. They paved the way for us to actually be greater than they were in impact, and we failed. And when we fail, we don't just fail ourselves and our purpose and our destiny. We fail every last one who's dependent on what we're supposed to be. And so when I see a Black sister stand up and say, you know what? There are probably consequences for this, but somebody has to do it. Then that person needs to be recognized for just what is happening, because I've seen Neota do it and have to be in hiding. I've seen it the same thing, Doc, for Latava.
Yep.
Speaking truth to the power to the level that she's got to literally leave the country. Mm-hmm. And where are our men? That's been my challenge. I mean, you got to back to Dr. King, and then I'm done. If you don't have something you're willing to die for,
right,
you ain't living. Because that thing you're willing to die for gives value to the time you're here. Mm-hmm. You have something you're willing to die for. It tells you this life I'm living is precious. But there's something that can happen that I will give it up in a heartbeat.
Yep. I would tell my husband a lot of times, because I'll come home, get a full-time position, tell him I quit. So he's kind of used to me. And I will always tell him, "Hun, this is bigger than us. This is bigger than our 3 children. Are they not my top priority? You bet." But I know I gotta send them out into the society where we're turning our backs on these kids, and they're entering schools like it's a actual prison. I mean, you might as well say, well, I call it prison prep. Schools are prison preps. You know, somebody, and we all should feel a sense of urgency right about now in stepping up on behalf of our babies. You know, but
man, if you were to look at a prison mess hall
mm-hmm.
and a high school cafeteria empty,
Yep.
can't tell the difference.
Yep.
Cannot tell the difference. System of moving about,
Mm-hmm.
highly similar.
Yep.
And again, we're expecting our enemy to do what's right by us.
Yeah.
Doc, you've heard me tell this story again. If I'm not mistaken, it's Zimbabwe. If I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
or is it Tanzania? I think it's Zimbabwe. Got their independence in 1957. And they're a poor country, but they're independent.
Mm-hmm.
They have copper mines. Copper is valuable. It's used for a lot of things. People will literally steal it from your house here in America. So it's got value, but they didn't know how to mine it. They didn't know how to mine it. A company that does this comes in and they consult with them, and instead of teaching them how to mine it, they make an offer. What we'll do is we'll mine it for you, and we will pay you $75 million. $75 million. We'll pay you $75 million for the rights to mine it, and we'll give you 5% of the proceeds. Now, to make this deal even more stupid, they said, we're not going to pay you the $75 million up front. Give us 90 days.
Wow.
What do? They go out and mine the mine, make the $75 million off of mining the mine, pay them with the money they made from mining their mine, and then only give them 5% of the proceeds. You know how they were able to do that? They didn't understand how things work. You got one of the poorest countries on the planet. You got people dying in the streets from AIDS, and you sit up and gave away the lifeblood of your country because you didn't understand how things work. And people get upset. People get in their feelings because of how passionate I'm about that. We keep getting burned because we won't take time to learn how things work. You want to whine and complain about the violence in our community that Black boys and young Black males are committing, but you won't look at where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't born that way.
Right. Right.
That right there is and they just sit up and what do? Get dressed, go to school. And then we've even been trained to dumb them down before they get there. What we start telling our kids at about 4 or 5 years old, get your head out the cloud. Stop all that daydream. You need to start focusing.
Mm-hmm.
So we kill their imagination. What is the greatest power you have as a human? Your imagination. It's where the things that don't exist come from. Everything that we have that wasn't existing at one point came from someone's imagination. But we are killing our kids' imagination so that they can be squeezed into a box and given something to do that doesn't benefit them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So where you're at right now is, I've had a chance to look at your blog and a couple of other things. You've got a Facebook page that they've locked you out of. Have you gotten back in yet?
Not yet, sir.
You're starting to build a presence on TikTok as well.
Yeah.
A YouTube channel. And I'm going to make sure I put all of this in the description box so people can check you out.
Okay, thank you.
But it's so much. And if you're like me and Doc, it's so much. I think James Baldwin said this, Doc, to be Black and be somewhat conscious in America is to be in a conscious state of rage.
all the time.
All the
Don't
time.
leave it out.
And so the question I'm trying to ask is, with all this you have, how are you managing that emotionally, psychologically, and how you're disseminating what you know? Because as you can see, what happens with me, anytime I'm giving an audience all this stuff that I've spent years putting together to understand starts to come out, and I'll take what's supposed to have been 5 minutes and it'll be 30 minutes.
Me too.
Yeah. And so how are you managing that?
Well, like I said, other than writing, I haven't really gone back into the classroom. I'm finding it difficult, and I am giving myself permission to grieve. So, but my daughters are, they play volleyball, so I'm around young people and they know me. So they're going to always get that 5 or 10 minutes of Miss Caradine, the teacher. And, Projects to Pinnacle came about because of, like I said, going through parenting classes. And what I wanted to do is reach back and empower parents, because I think we act that way because we don't know what's in us. We don't know our value. We don't know our worth. And I didn't want it to be scripted. So just to reach parents, because we are the most powerful people. If schools do not have our children, I mean, the doors could easily be closed. But given the zip code says if we are involved or not. Because when we go to much more affluent areas, we're the first one at their meetings. We're there to show our support to our children. And these are the same people that grew up in the hood with me. So it's like we can do the same thing amongst our own in our community. So I wanted to reach parents, and that have always been my passion. And it's needed, especially now. It's needed. It's like all this stuff, we've shared articles, we've shared videos of what's going on with our children inside these schools. And collectively, we Black parents have not risen up yet. Like, what does it take for us? So that's where I am, is to reach parents.
And
how? I don't know. Facebook is my account. So I stayed in Facebook jail.
Yeah. So, and that's what that question was. Is like, why are you locked out of your channel? It's because she actually speaks truth, and what you'll find on these social media channels, which is another thing that Yoda consistently talks about, is building our own, and we've done a great deal. I say I've contributed in the way of content, but Neota's brilliance and ability to put things together has really given us a voice and a platform outside of mainstream social media, which is going to be extremely important, because the more you begin to speak truth, the more you become censored. And they have this beautiful thing now they call, where they can say they're not censoring you, but they are. It's called shadow banning, where they literally sit up and change the algorithms so nobody sees your posts.
Yep.
Okay, so I've got 5,000. I'm maxed out on Facebook, and maybe out of that 5,000 people see my posts, because what I'm spitting, they don't want them to hear. They don't want them to see. They don't want them to read. And so you have to have other ways of reaching people. And it happens on every other channel as well. So the thing is, I really hope that people support you. I really hope that people get behind you. I told you, me and you are going to be friends. Just on the focus of the prison to pipeline, the school to prison pipeline in and of itself, and the intricate details of how well they put that thing together, and how it works seamlessly. And a lot of people are participating in it and don't even realize, because again, we don't understand how things work. I tell parents all the time, don't just automatically give permission, because in order for your child to be referred and actually placed in special education, you have to give your permission for them to be assessed. They can't just do it without you. Now, once they get them in there, It's a problem getting them out.
Mhm.
You have to test them out, assess them out, and a bunch of other things and whatever. And so there are times that children need resources, and those resources need to be there. That's why they were supposed to be put there, but they're now being used as a weapon.
Mhm.
And you have to understand how that weapon is being used. So let's take the real quick trip, and I want to give it back to Doc, and then Doc can hand it to you. But let's take a real quick trip to how we get to the violence among African American adolescent boys and young adult males, and how it's devastating our community. They aren't born. What happens is you put them in an environment where you have already 1 million men, 1.5 million men that we can't account for. We know 1.2 of them are in prison.
Mhm.
So out of 2.3 million prisoners, 1.3 of them are black males. Okay, so that's a problem. So we don't have a representation of black masculinity. There's a problem with that because as I'm born, along with my sister, who is my fraternal twin, we're pretty much same size. We may grow at the same rate for a certain period of time. She may be stronger than me. She may be faster than me. But what happens is we go through this thing called puberty. Now all of a sudden I'm starting to produce testosterone at a much higher level. So now I go through a growth spurt. My voice change. I become more muscular. I become stronger. And I also become a little bit more aggressive.
Mhm.
And if I don't have an understanding of that, there's no way to contextualize that. If there's no way to frame it, then I've got to figure out why. And nobody's there. But when you have a man there, a man is going to tell you, and this is what I've taught my sons, this is what I teach the boys in the program. Look, at this age, what's happening is you're entering your first stage of manhood. This is where you become a protector. You are going to be a protector before a provider. Now, we emphasize provision. A man has to be a provider, but before he's a provider, he's a protector. He is physically capable of defending before he can be able to provide.
Right.
Before he gets his job skills, he's bigger and stronger than her. So he can step in when someone bigger than stronger her attempts to harm her and say, not my sister. And that's what we've taught our boys. Nothing better ever happened to your sister and you were there. Okay, that's protective. Well, you teach them that. Now I understand it. And then you say, that's one of the things that you're going to have. That's why you're going to always be needed in the black community, because you protect it. Now, here's what happens. When someone identifies with something, they defend their right to be that. So guess what happens? When the opportunity comes to do something negative to the community, it pops in their head. No, I am a defender of the community.
Mhm.
I won't harm the community because I defend it. It's in me. It's called psycho-cybernetics. It's a setting in your mind that says this is who I am. My behavior will always match how I see myself, my self-concept, my self-image. Then the next thing I tell them is you are the defender of the black woman. You should never, a black man never harms a black woman. Now I'm the defender of the black woman. Guess what I will never do if I see myself as a defender of a black woman? Harm one.
Mhm.
But I got to have it in my identity. The problem is the men that should be doing it, they didn't have anybody to show them. So most of them are in prison. The others don't have an understanding of it. So they're actually teaching you that the way you prove your manhood is by how many women you can bed versus how many children you can take care of. And then knowing that and not producing any more than what you're taking care of, because that is a contributor to poverty.
Mhm.
Then the next thing is you have an absolute responsibility to become a business owner. Why? Because at the moment you become a business owner, you start to build wealth that you can pass to your kid. You can't pass that job. I don't care how much they pay you at it. You can't pass it on to the next generation. So now that's the difference. But if I don't give them an identity, they have an entire world of music, movies, and images that tell them who they are. You are naturally violent. You are over-sexualized. The black woman is just a piece of meat to you. You're going to judge her solely by what she ranks on a scale of 1 to 10. You don't care what she has inside of her brain and inside of her heart. You just want to see beauty so you can parade her around. And anytime she doesn't do what you want to do, you can smack her around because she really doesn't have any value to you. That's what the music is telling them. That's what the images are telling them. That's how they're seeing themselves. And if no one has told them who they are and that's the image they see, they will assimilate to it.
Mhm.
And then you want to know why they're doing what they're doing. We're not taking the responsibility of doing something about it.
Right.
Doc?
Yeah, I think we have to get into the position, and I've said this many times, we have to support people and grassroots people, grassroots organizations that are truly about restoring and preserving the Black family. And, we thought that, during the Million Man March, we were going to move towards that, at least trying to centralize that, try to have a unified national platform. Well, that didn't work out. But I'm hoping at some point in the future that we can get to that point. We have to start funding the grassroots people, because there are people out here doing the work on their own dime, and that's one of the things we do on this show. We bring people on like yourself to try to let people know that you are out here, that there are a lot of people like you out here, there are a lot of people out here like Dr. Wallace doing this work on their own dime, and trying to provide services for our people, and they need to be supported. Going back to Ferguson, Black Lives Matter did a unrepairable damage to our finances in terms of us being comfortable even donating to one another. They did a lot of damage. And it's going to take some time for people to become secure enough and trusting enough to donate that money, because look at the millions of dollars that went into that co-opting of a grassroots movement. Imagine if that money would have went into actual grassroots people like yourselves and like Dr. Wallace. Imagine what we could have done by now, the lives we could have saved, and the lives we could have impacted with that amount of money.
And so if you had one thing that is representative of the vastness that I discovered about you, what would that message be to people who are listening and need to know what is going on and what needs to change?
I would say pull your kids out of school and let's start creating our own schools and teaching our kids our own history. And seemingly overnight, they'll get it and run with it. Because in this day and time, they have access to everything. We just need to give them the right tools and the right knowledge. And then, because they're ready. They're really ready for the truth. So I say, because these schools are not for our kids. They're not. And I'm coming from an angle of an educator, so this isn't working. So.
And again, I'm going to share the links in the description box in post production. I'm going to share the links where people can check out what you're doing. And even though she's locked out of her Facebook account, it's still open. She just can't contribute to it right now. But she is. I'm letting everybody know. But there's definitely a lot to see there. Definitely check out her blog. And if it's anything that I've gotten from her, and she sort of puts me in the same vein, Doc, as Latava and Neota, that rare breed that is aware and vocal. And they deserve our protection as well.
Absolutely.
That should be an insulation around her that says, this one, touch her and we coming for you. And I think a long time ago, when they were coming for Latava, I went and I made that very clear. And I think we've also made that very clear about Neota.
Yep.
She's not expendable. So if you touch her, we're going to make you pay a price. And that's something that Black men need to be willing to do. On a level, I think we've lost ourselves. See, one of the things that I see um, is unfortunately we've allowed them to identify us and give us a place. We've allowed them to define our relational dynamic. The black man now, in order to be a high value man, he simply has to have the bag. That's all he has to have is the bag. The bag is generally considered for most at least 6 figures.
Or he has to carry a bag, Doc.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But even then, he better have a bag. If he's carrying a bag, he definitely got to have the bag. But he has to have the bag, and he's a high value man. And the woman is being told, in order to get the high value man, you got to be a 9 or a 10. So our women are killing themselves with surgery and everything else, trying to fit into a mold so they can get the bag. And the bag is a small part of the equation. Because here's what I can tell you about the bag. Anybody on this planet who decides to have the bag and are willing to put in the work can get the bag. You don't need anybody to give you the bag. You don't need nobody to bless you with the bag. If you want the bag, go get the bag. But there's a lot of other things that the bag won't give you. And those are the things that we're not appreciating about one another. See, it's wonderful to have a beautiful wife that looks gorgeous, but it's even more important to have a wife that can see you and understand you. It's good to have a husband who's taking care of the bills, but it's more important to have a husband that, if I'm anywhere in his vicinity, I'm as safe as I can be in this world. It's important to know that in my down moments, he speaks life into me. When I'm feeling low, he knows how to raise me and reach into me. Those are some of the things about manhood that we're not celebrating. The things that say, hey, if you are part of my family, I'm going to speak life into you. I'm going to be your priest. I'm going to be your prophet. I'm going to be your protector. I'm going to be your provider. And I'm going to be your promoter. Nobody's going to know how awesome you are more than what I tell them. And the same thing with the woman. She comes along. She says, hey, I see you're leaning a little bit. Let me prop you up. You had a rough day. I got you. I believe in you. I'm going to hold you down. That's the thing we're missing, because everybody's chasing the bag and looking for a dime. And I call the dynamic the body and the bag. That's where we're at right now. It's the body and the bag dynamic. And you don't build relationships with the body and the bag. You don't build empires with the body and the bag. Right. You can't become a powerful force with the body and the bag. Hell, Nelson Rockefeller told you, point blank, it's not about owning anything. It's about controlling everything. So they want you to put your name on it so that when they decide to take it, they know where to go find it.
Right.
We got a long way to go to catch up, but we got to start understanding that we are not each other's enemy. Right. We got to start learning that there is something in loving one another at a level past disagreement. I believe Dr. King said it this way, and then I'm done, and everybody can have their last statement, and we can go ahead and leave this. He said that we've got to learn to be disagreeable without being violently disagreeable. Mm-hmm. We'll go at each other with a viciousness that we reserve for ourselves and won't aim at them.
Right.
Is there anything that you want to leave? I'm going to let Doc close it out. So is there anything that you want to share and leave? Is an important message, maybe for parents or other.
Just
somebody that's willing to.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to.
No, go ahead.
Just end with pay attention to your kids. Know that you raised some of the most brilliant minds ever, and don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And let us get our kids out of this prison prep, please. And let's do this. This is our season.
Marshata, I want to thank you for coming on. And we didn't really even get into how dysfunctional school districts are, but it takes a lot to navigate a school district. And I work for one, so I know. I didn't realize how dysfunctional school districts and school boards were until I got on the inside. So I commend you for your work, because it takes a lot, because they'll have you running in circles. You know that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for what you do, and we appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you both.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for stopping by. For those of you who stayed with us for the entire broadcast, thank you so much. I'm going to put the information to be able to follow Marshata in the description box post production. Also, don't forget to support the work we do at the Odyssey Project with programs like Black Men Lead and so many others. It's so important to the future. We can't keep saying our children are our future and not investing in them.
Right.
It makes absolutely no sense. So on that note, we're going to get ready to get out of here. Once again,